Matt Williamson. How's it going? Things are great here. Can't complain. Very wintry out here in the Berg. Got a long week to prepare for the Miami Dolphins. Coach Tomlin's press conference was today, Tuesday. I'm recording this Tuesday night. And got some concussion stuff out there, but it does sound like there's a chance Derek Harmon does return. And I kind of think that's a good chance of it. Which leads us to our first question. I've not done a mailbag in a while. My apologies. But Max asks, if the Steelers are too dependent on single players, what should that tell us? And he puts Harmon in parentheses, or am I wrong? It shouldn't work that way, right? I see what you're saying. You know, like, it's a small sample size, but I told you guys before, they're basically allowing 100 yards more on the ground in games Harmon has missed this year compared to when he's in there. Last year, they were the best run defense in the league when Cam Hayward was in the game, the worst when he was out. Over the course of TJ Watt's career, the record with him out of the lineup is remarkably bad. I mean, it's like 1 win and 10 losses, something like that. So I see what you're saying. And maybe, I think, the Hayward one is why you draft Harmon, not to mention Hayward's age. And frankly, they put a lot of resources in the D-line this last year or so. And right this minute on December 9th, they're not getting a lot out of it. But a lot of it's injuries. It'd be nice to have you, Kaylee and Lowry and some of those type of guys, depth pieces, better depth pieces than what you have. But I tend to say no, because frankly, I don't think Derek Harmon makes the run defense world go round. I think that's a little bit fluky. And some of it was at the beginning of the season versus the end of the season, and times have changed and his surroundings have changed. The secondary is totally different, et cetera. Benton's playing at a different level as well. But I think that's not uncommon around the league, to be honest, that your best players, obviously a quarterback, but that's not what we're talking about here, are super important. I wouldn't say, despite the 3 examples I just mentioned, that the Steelers are one player reliant much more than other teams. I just don't get that vibe, especially after, doing as much as I do around the league. I don't get that feeling. But I see what you're saying, and I do think it is a good question. All right, next question is from James H. And he asks, Siamalu will be 33 next October, and Cam will be 37 before Latrobe starts. If this draft is deep for wide receivers, shouldn't O-line and guard be higher priorities? First off, it's a little early. It's very early for me to start talking about depth of position in this draft. I mean, when we get to April, I might be like, this D-line class stinks. It's not worth it. So we're just going to operate like all things being equal. First of all, maybe you're not aware, or maybe some others aren't either, but Siamalu is scheduled to be a free agent. And I think pretty sure the plan is let him walk at his age with his injury history, and Spencer Anderson becomes your starting left guard, and go from there. Now, last week aside, I think Siamalu's played well enough that I might just offer him a 1-year deal, highly respected veteran, smart, and bring him back at a reasonable rate if he's interested in that, and still have Spencer Anderson in the mix. I very much think that with Broderick Jones, likely his last year after this season, and as many picks as the Steelers will have, and again, very subject to change. We're in December. This is 4 weeks away. But I would be shocked if the Steelers don't take a guard and a tackle in this upcoming draft. And I'm not talking about like 7th round picks. I'm thinking like a 3rd round project at tackle and a 5th round guard, or maybe even flop that. But I mean, reasonable young investments. And I don't know what that class is like, but I didn't like that they didn't take an offensive lineman last year. I'm pretty much a big believer that you take one every year. And in this case, if you have extra picks, if they have 10, 11, 12 picks or whatever, when it's all said and done, I think you absolutely take 2, one of which maybe is Jones' replacement, that you groom. One of them might be fighting Anderson for the starting job if Ciamalu's not around, or a year from now that's displaced. So I see what you're saying, but I can't say that you have to take him over a receiver or certainly over a quarterback. As for the D-line situation, obviously the Harmon and Black, they drafted 2 last year. They only keep usually 7 on the roster, sometimes even 6. And if 2 of them were draft picks a year ago and Benton wasn't that far removed either, you have had a youth infusement. Is that a word? I don't know. On the defensive front for, who knows if Cam even comes back. He could certainly retire after this year. But more and more, especially watching these last 2 games, somewhere, draft or free agency, I'm really leaning towards they need to find more of a traditional nose tackle in the Casey Hampton type mold, like something, a space eater that might not give you much against in the passing game, but just doesn't get moved backwards. And then Benton is not a nose anymore. And then all of a sudden you kind of have more Hayward-like 3-4 defensive end types. You see what I'm saying? So all things being equal, I think you're onto something here. I think that they will or should, I don't know what they will do, should draft 2 offensive linemen, not a center. Unless it's a center guard, swing guy, and a big-bodied interior run plugger, I think makes a ton of sense on defense.
Football season's finally here. Time to check out the latest odds, futures, and win totals on the FanDuel Sportsbook. Think the Steelers are headed to the Super Bowl? Lock in your bets today. Whatever your game, FanDuel Sportsbook delivers the latest lines, futures, and specials, so you can join in on all the action.
Paul asks, are you disappointed in Yahya Black this season after he looked like a stud in camp and preseason? Short answer is yes. I thought he would be more impactful. This past week, he had to play so many snaps. He was like at 64, where usually he plays like 12. And it wasn't good. And he, too, gets pushed backwards a lot. He's slow off the ball. He's extremely powerful and long and looks the part and is big, obviously. But his pads tend to get quite high, especially when he's playing too many snaps at this point. He is not a nose that I thought he might transition into. He's had a kind of a nose conversation. So he absolutely worries me. And I think he's a perfect example of preseason reps can be really misleading, because he frankly was just bigger and stronger than a lot of the 3rd, 4th quarter offensive linemen he faced in those games, and just was a bully. He was just a grizzly bear and pushed them around. And that's just not going to fly against starting guards, in this league. So I'm not saying he's a bust. I thought he would be much more of a valuable contributor by December than he is now, where he's kind of getting thrust in there and is a liability. And like a lot of these D linemen, is moving backwards way too much in the run game. And he's not going to bring a ton in the passing game. So what value are you, except for you're the best we got at the moment, which is problematic. So yes, my short answer is I expected more. Now, is he going to get much quicker off the ball? Probably not. Could his technique improve? Absolutely. Could he get his pads down a little better and, more of a hit on the rise player? Probably. He's not the most flexible for that. But I will say, and I probably should have said this 10 times in the last 2 years, I always avoid assistant coach conversations, but he's been around long enough that I trust Carl Dunbar quite a bit, the Steelers defensive line coach, to get the most out of some of these prospects. So I guess what I'm saying is he's in good hands. Now, it's up to Black, though, to take those next steps. And yeah, I thought he was going to be a real steal, when preseason ended, and that's definitely not the case. All right. Brian Revac asked me, do you anticipate the same wide receivers to play in the Finns game that did against Baltimore? What does that say about the development trust in Roman? Well, I think there isn't much trust in Roman Wilson or enough development. And I absolutely think Wilson and Austin's size or lack thereof very much hurts them in this conversation and is getting exposed more and more as the season goes on, that they just don't play big. They aren't big. That stuff matters. And it's hard to have two of those guys on the field together, even though Metcalf's a monster physically, all those things. So that's a problem. I don't know what the relationship is with Rodgers and Wilson specifically in terms of adjustments, knowing where to be, communication, adjusting routes on the fly, all those things that are super important to Rodgers more than most quarterbacks even. But I get the impression it's not an A+, you know what I mean? And that doesn't mean Wilson's dumb or doesn't work hard or whatever, or he's still very inexperienced. Remember, he barely played last year. But I think he has seen the field enough to say he's definitely leaning much more towards not being useful than he is being highly useful. He's another one that maybe another training camp and we break camp and go, oh, okay, now he's starting to find himself, but then he's already in year 3. As for usage against Miami on Monday night, I anticipate DK to hardly ever leave the field. And I'm really stretching and just kind of squinting on this one because I don't know the answer. Thielen started the game, and I think he's going to play even more in this one because him and Austin and Valdez-Scantling were pretty close in their snap counts for this one and routes run and all those things. But I'm guessing Thielen gets even more of a bump with his second season, get an extra practice too before Monday night. Saw some time in live action with Rodgers and the ones. I do think Valdez-Scantling will continue to be the outside the numbers, downfield guy, try to keep teams honest, lighten the load on Metcalf a little just because of his over-the-top ability. And I don't think Austin's going away, but I think they've kind of seen enough and he's fine, but he's not great. And frankly, none of these guys are great. I mean, the word I've been using for the wide receiver position outside of Metcalf all year is searching. I mean, I think they're searching, and at the moment they're just throwing a handful of crap at the fan and see what sticks. Hopefully something. Skoronek's going to get a helmet every Sunday or Monday because of his special teams ability, which has a lot of value. And Metcalf is, and I think Austin's pretty safe for that manner as well. The two new guys, don't play special teams, so that doesn't help, but it does show to me that they like what they potentially might be as wideouts. Watching Thielen against the Ravens, he really doesn't run well, and that isn't surprising. And even on his best day, he wasn't a burner, but he lumbers out there. Valdez-Scantling takes a minute to get going, but he does open it up and has those long strides. So there's still something in the tank for both these guys, I think. Thielen is the crafty guy. Would it be the 3 of them out there most in 3 receiver sets? I don't know that for sure. I'm leaning towards Thielen would be your number 2, but that still might be Austin. This is a tough question to answer, and it's definitely one that's on my mind. But just figured I'd talk through it with you guys and try to see all the angles. And again, I mean, it goes without saying that they don't have a true number 2 receiver at all. These guys are all stretches to even call them 3s, and I'm not sure would Thielen and Valdez-Scantling even be on an active roster or in the league if it wasn't for the Steelers? Maybe, maybe not. but I am willing to be open to those two are better, bigger, more experienced, different than what they've played with the majority of the year. And to me, that I'll go fish. You know what I mean? I'll take door number 2 than what's in my hand or what I have at the moment. You know, give me the mystery box. So not ideal. Thanks everyone. This was fun. Over and out.